Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to leave a like and tell me in the comments what kind of stories you'd like to hear next. Also, only a small percentage of the people who watch these videos are actually subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. It really helps support the channel. You can also check out the Patreon linked in the description below if you'd like access to even more stories created by my team. I hope you enjoyed today's story. I remained frozen, staring at the outfit lying in front of me, when Cheryl suddenly looked directly at me and spoke in a calm but commanding voice. "Take your clothes off and put that on. Right now." She didn't hesitate for a second before adding, "Here. In the car." Before I could even think of replying, she cut me off. "I don't want excuses. I don't want questions. I expect you to do exactly what you're told, the moment you're told." Reluctantly, I reached for my suit jacket and slipped it off, carefully placing it beside me. I glanced over at Cheryl, hoping to see some sign that she was joking, but instead she impatiently motioned for me to keep going. I removed my necktie next, laying it neatly on top of the jacket. Taking my time, I began undoing each button of my dress shirt. Once the buttons were free, I pulled the shirt loose from my trousers before unfastening the cuffs. After taking a deep breath, I slowly slid the shirt from my shoulders. Cheryl watched with obvious annoyance. "I've seen enough videos to know you can get dressed and undressed much faster than this whenever one of your girlfriends asks. Stop stalling." Her voice became even firmer. "Hurry up, or I'll have the driver pull over at the next light and you can get out." I was still wearing an undershirt, so I quickly pulled it over my head. The cool air hit my bare chest, where only a small amount of body hair remained visible. I bent down and untied my shoes before slipping them off along with my socks. Now the only clothing left on me was my slacks and my boxer briefs. With trembling hands, I unbuckled my belt, loosened the waistband, and slowly lowered the zipper. Every movement felt heavier than the last. Deep down, I kept hoping Cheryl would suddenly laugh and admit the whole thing had been an elaborate prank. She never did. I pushed my trousers down my legs and stepped out of them, leaving myself standing there in nothing except my underwear. "Those come off too," she ordered immediately. "Don't waste my time." Swallowing my pride, I slipped off the boxer briefs as well, suddenly feeling completely exposed. Before I had time to react, Cheryl handed me a pair of women's panties. I quickly pulled them on, grateful that at least they provided some small amount of coverage. Following her instructions, I adjusted everything so the front appeared smooth beneath the fabric. It wasn't comfortable in the slightest, but embarrassment had already replaced every other emotion. Next came the dress. She handed it over without saying a word, and I carefully lifted it over my head before pulling it down until it rested properly around me. After that, she passed me a pair of stockings. As I slowly rolled them up my legs, Cheryl stepped forward and settled a shoulder-length blonde wig over my head. Once the wig was adjusted, she handed me a garter belt and instructed me to fasten the stockings to it. Finally, she gave me a pair of high heels. To my surprise, they fit remarkably well. Everything seemed to have been chosen specifically for me. Cheryl clearly knew my clothing sizes far better than I had realized. The final piece was a small half apron. When I tied it into place and looked down at myself, the reflection was startling. Aside from my flat chest, the outfit resembled the traditional uniform of a French, made almost perfectly. Not long afterward, the driver turned into a parking lot beside one of those large charity donation bins. Cheryl instructed him to gather every item of clothing I had removed. Without hesitation, he carried my suit, shoes, shirt, tie, trousers, underwear, and everything else over to the donation container before dropping them inside. Watching my clothes disappear unsettled me. Still, I tried convincing myself it wasn't permanent. I had more clothes waiting for me back at the house. Once we got there, surely I could change back into something normal and put this humiliating experience behind me. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. When we finally arrived, the driver opened the door and Cheryl stepped out first. I followed close behind, painfully aware of every step in the heels as we entered through the front entrance. Waiting inside were Jackie and Marie, Cheryl's two household maids. I recognized both of them immediately from previous encounters, and the amused expression spreading across their faces made it obvious they were enjoying the sight of me. Cheryl gently pushed me toward them with a satisfied smile. All I wanted was to escape upstairs, change into my own clothes, and pretend none of this had ever happened. Cheryl had completely different plans. "I'd like you both to meet our newest maid," she announced cheerfully. "Her name is Phyllis." I looked at her in disbelief. "Phyllis," I repeated. She smiled. "Yes, that's your name now." I couldn't help asking, "Haven't you had enough fun already?" She simply laughed. "The fun hasn't even started yet." Turning toward the other two women, she continued, "Phyllis has entirely too much body hair. I'd like all of it removed." Then she looked back at me. "You'll cooperate with them." Her tone became unmistakably serious. "And if you refuse, you have my permission to discipline her." Jackie and Marie each took one of my hands and calmly led me away toward the servants' quarters, while I struggled to understand just how far Cheryl intended to take everything. Around that time, the two women pressed a pair of soft objects against my bare chest and instructed me to keep perfectly still. "Hold them in place," one of them warned. "If you don't, you'll regret it." I quickly realized they were artificial breast forms. They had already coated the backs with a strong adhesive and were carefully attaching them to my freshly shaved chest. The glue felt cold at first, but as it began to set, it pulled tightly against my skin and became increasingly uncomfortable. The entire process was humiliating enough, but another thought immediately crossed my mind. Even if I somehow managed to leave the house and find ordinary clothes to wear again, I'd still have to figure out how to remove those stubborn attachments without damaging my skin. Once the adhesive had completely dried, they slipped a bra over the breast forms and carefully adjusted everything until it looked natural beneath my uniform. After that, I put the rest of the maid outfit back on. The blonde wig was still sitting on my head. Unfortunately, they weren't finished with that either. One of them reached for another tube of adhesive. "What are you doing now?" I asked nervously. "We're making sure this stays exactly where it belongs." Before I could protest, they secured the wig in place with the same determination they'd shown throughout the afternoon. When that was finished, they guided me into a chair in front of a large mirror. A collection of cosmetics was spread across the table. One of the women picked up a foundation brush while the other organized our makeup, lipstick, and powder. "We're using long-wear makeup," she explained. "It isn't going to wash off easily." "Is that really necessary?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "Madam's instructions." The second maid smiled slightly. "And eventually you'll need to learn how to apply all of this yourself, so pay close attention." "This is completely ridiculous." The response came immediately. "If you keep arguing, you'll earn another punishment. And if that still doesn't convince you, the driver can always help us with the paddle." That threat ended the discussion. I remained silent while they patiently worked on every detail of my appearance. They shaped my eyebrows, blended foundation across my face and neck, added color to my cheeks, carefully outlined my eyes, applied mascara, and finally finished everything with lipstick. By the time they declared themselves satisfied, the afternoon had slipped into early evening. "We're serving dinner tonight," one of them announced. "For Cheryl and her guests." My stomach sank. "I can't possibly go out there looking like this." "You absolutely can. And you absolutely will." When they finally stepped aside, I cautiously looked into the mirror. The reflection staring back at me hardly resembled the person I remembered. I had never been especially tall or heavily built. At roughly 5 feet 6 inches and only around 130 pounds, I had always been on the smaller side. My facial features had often been described as soft rather than rugged, and with every trace of body hair gone, the illusion was surprisingly convincing. The only feature that still hinted otherwise was my Adam's apple. Even that had been disguised. One of the maids fastened a decorative choker around my neck, covering it well enough that it blended naturally with the outfit. Standing beside Jackie and Marie, I realized something unsettling. We were all approximately the same height and build. From a distance, I looked remarkably similar to them. That realization unsettled me more than anything else that had happened all day. Later that evening, Cheryl welcomed 5 guests into the dining room. The 3 of us quietly moved around the table serving food, refilling glasses, and clearing dishes while doing our best to remain unnoticed. For a short while, I dared to believe I might get through the evening without anyone paying particular attention to me. That hope disappeared when one of the guests glanced in my direction. "It looks like you've hired someone new." Cheryl smiled. "Yes," she replied pleasantly. "Her name is Phyllis." She paused just long enough to let everyone look at me. "Although some of you used to know her by another name." "Phil." Heat rushed into my face. I could feel myself blushing as every eye in the room turned toward me. All I wanted was to disappear. Instinctively, I started backing toward the kitchen, but Jackie and Marie quietly stepped into my path before I could leave. Cheryl looked directly at me. "Phyllis," I reluctantly stopped. "Come over here." I obeyed. "Everyone should have a proper chance to meet you." Soft laughter spread around the room as I walked forward, painfully aware that every step brought me further into the center of attention. The embarrassment I had felt earlier was nothing compared to this. Whatever lesson Cheryl intended to teach me, it had gone far beyond anything I could have imagined when the day began.